Okay, so this is going to be a quick tutorial on how to do some very basic operations in Fusion 360. One of the first things that you want to do when you're working in Fusion 360 is to check your document settings to see what units you're using. In this case, you can see that we're in millimeters, which is fine, but if you want to change it to something like inches, for example, then it's quite easy to do. We're going to continue to work in millimeters, but this is how you would change that. Different projects will require different units, and so it's always a good idea to check this before you get started on your project. One of the very first things we're going to do is we're going to do some simple sketching, and when you create a sketch, it's going to be able to create some flat geometry that will ultimately turn into a 3D shape. When you click on New Sketch, you're going to have to select what plane that you want to create on. For this example, I'm going to be sketching on the bottom plane here. So as we come in, we have a variety of basic shapes that we can make that will inspire our 3D designs. The first that I'm going to demonstrate is a two-point rectangle. And so in this particular case, I can create this two-point rectangle and I can choose the units. I can type these in or I can drag it out. I like typing them in because it's a little more precise. And so if I wanted to make a 100 millimeter by 100 millimeter rectangle, I can type in 100, hit tab, and it moves over to the new field, and type in 100 and hit enter. And that's going to create my 100 by 100 millimeter rectangle. Now let's say that I wanted to create another rectangle right in the center of this. I could also use my rectangle tool, but over here I might choose a center rectangle because that's going to allow me to kind of think about drawing something from the center. And so I can come over here, and now you can see that it still creates a rectangle, but it uses a different method for creating it. And in this case, I'm going to create a 50 by 50 millimeter rectangle. Okay, so now at this point, I have some basic geometry that I want to bring into the third dimension. To do that, most oftentimes, we'll use the extrude command. And so if I hit finish sketch here, I can hit E for extrude, or you'll also notice that there's an option up here to extrude in our solids menu. So if I hit E, I can actually choose the geometry that I'd like to bring into the third dimension. I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to bring it up 50 millimeters. Okay. Now, when I do this, you'll notice that I have some options. By default, this is going to create a new body, which is good. I want that to be kind of its own shape, but oftentimes you can actually use other operations to either join two shapes together or even sometimes cut them apart from each other. But for now, I want to do a new body, and that's going to create a nice three-dimensional shape for me. I can keep track of all the things that I'm creating in the sketches folder over here. I can see that original sketch that I made, and then in the bodies folder, I can see this new three-dimensional body that I made. Okay, so that's how we can use some basic tools to create some very basic shapes, but let's keep exploring some more. Let's say that I want to create a new sketch, and this time I want to create it on the surface of the object that I just made. So I can click on the surface there, and let's say I want to create some holes that are going to go down through here. Maybe I'm going to put some bolts through here or something like that. So I'm going to choose a circle, and I can come in here, and maybe I want to be very precise about where those holes need to be. And so I'm not quite ready to place a circle there because I want to think maybe I want to come in maybe 10 millimeters from each corner to create this circle. To do that, I can create a line, and since I'm not going to be making this line part of the permanent geometry here, what I'd really like to do is to make that a construction line. And so if I come out here and I come maybe 10 millimeters out this way, and then I come 10 millimeters down this way, okay? So I now know that I can turn these into little construction lines. So these are just temporary guides. And that's going to allow me to start my circle at this point, and I know that I'm in the exact same spot that I intend to be. So if I come over here, I'm going to choose my center diameter circle, and I'm going to make a 10 millimeter circle in this spot here. And I can actually repeat this on all edges. And so if I come back over to my line, and I turn on the construction line, and come 10 millimeters across there, and I can repeat that. Come down 10 millimeters. Again, I know that this is the center point that I need to go, so I can create another circle. Again, I don't want that to be a construction circle, I want this to be a real circle. So construction lines are just guidelines. whereas these real lines will allow us to actually create physical geometry. Okay. And I'm going to repeat that in the corners a few more times. So again, come over here, make this a construction line, come in 10 millimeters, create another construction line. You also notice that you can change the angle that you're creating these at. And so I'm using 90-degree angles because I just want to have some nice straight geometry in these corners, but you can get creative as you like. Okay, turn on the construction lines, come in 10. And there are certainly a lot of different tricks that you can use to speed this up, but we're keeping it pretty simple for today. And again, I'm going to turn off the construction line for these circles. And come out 10 millimeters. Okay. Now at this point, I can finish my sketch, but you'll notice that I don't actually have these holes running through. So again, we can extrude, but this time instead of extruding kind of up to create new geometry, we're going to extrude down through this solid to create holes. So I can hit E for extrude. I can select these 4 bits, and when I drag them down, you'll notice that it turns red and that the operation turns to cut. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be the way. We could say new bodies and we would create 4 new cylinders, but in this particular case I do want to cut because I want to remove the material away from this block that I've created. So if I click OK, you'll notice now that I've got 4 nice new holes in our body. Okay. So that being said, maybe I want to begin kind of moving some things around. To do that, I can hit the M tool, or for the move tool, by hitting M. So if I hit M, or if I select this option, I can select my body here, and I can move it in 3D space. If for some reason I wanted another one, you can always choose the Create Copy button. Sometimes that's helpful. But you can also rotate things if that's what you want to do. In this case, I'm going to leave this right here, but this is sometimes helpful in positioning things relative to others. Next thing that I want to do is I'm going to use the shell tool to kind of hollow out this block here. Now, I can see that this is a solid block. If I right-click here on Body and click Opacity Control and maybe make it 50%, I can sort of see that in here I've got just a lot of solid material. But maybe I wanted to make this an enclosure for some reason and hollow it out. So to do that, I can use the shell tool. In this particular case, I can select our object here. Okay, so shell, and select our body. And I can decide kind of what the thickness needs to be. So I'm going to make this 2 millimeters thick toward the inside, and that means it's going to kind of leave 2 millimeters toward inside, and then everything else is going to be hollow. So if I click OK, now you can see that I have this shell-like appearance that would be kind of 3D printer, and it would be hollow on the inside. However, if we 3D printed this as is, I wouldn't be able to really get on the inside. And so we're going to use the split tool to actually kind of cut this in half into 2 pieces that could be 3D printed and then assembled together. To do a split, you need a kind of a line that's going to allow you to split. To do that, what I like to do is I like to create a new sketch. And so I'm going to create a new sketch. And it can be anywhere, just as long as it's on the plane that you want to design on. I'm going to create a 2-point rectangle, and I'm going to oversize that rectangle and make it bigger than the object that I'm actually splitting. Okay, at this point, I'm going to finish this sketch. I'm going to extrude this up, and I'm just going to extrude it up 1 millimeter. And I don't want to cut into my thing. I want to create a new body, because I'm going to use this as kind of a guide for where I would like to cut the overall enclosure that I'm making. So if I click OK, at this point you'll notice that it's on the bottom of the enclosure, but that's not really where I want to split it. And so I'll use my Move tool here, and I'll select my body, and I'm going to raise this up to kind of maybe the midpoint of where I would like to split this in half. So that looks maybe right about there. Looks good. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And so at this point then I can say that after I use my split tool, this top half should be separated from the bottom half. So if I come over to Split Body, I can select Bodies to Split. That's this one. The splitting tool is going to be this surface, and I want to make sure that Extend Splitting Tool is selected. Once I click OK, you'll notice that there's a new body here. I can turn off the visibility of that splitting body right there. And now I'm left with the top half and the bottom half. And you'll notice how we can see that shell and that hollow structure inside. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the opacity here back to 100% to kind of make them look solid and opaque again. Okay. But I want to kind of see what these things are going to look like, and so I'm actually going to take my top body here and I'm going to move it. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually rotate it open by 90 degrees and scoot it over just a little bit and click OK. And here you can see that we do in fact have this kind of shelled enclosure that we could put together. Now that being said, maybe we want to make the edges of our enclosure a little bit smooth, and for that we can use the fillet tool. The fillet tool is accessible here. You can also access it by hitting the F key. And what it is going to allow you to do is to kind of round the edges of your enclosure. And so maybe if I click all 4 of these edges, okay, what you're then going to do is define a radius. So maybe I want to say, let's see if I give it a 1 millimeter radius. You can see how it begins to kind of round the edges of your design here. You can go up to 2. If you get up to 5, that could also probably start to cause some issues, and so you got to be careful about making it too large. But again, this is something that kind of helps improve the ergonomics of your overall design. I kind of like the look of 2, and so I'm going to do that there. And so you can see that maybe if this is the top of my device, that it's going to have these rounded edges that would come out in the design. So using a combination of all of these tools that we've discussed here, you're really going to be able to design quite a variety of geometries. It just takes a little bit of practice and combining them in new ways, but if you get good enough, then you can do quite a bit. And that's it.